The chosen one. The storm raged inside you, though no one else could see it. You walked through crowds that laughed, and hurried, and dreamed. Yet something in you had already begun to unravel. It was not despair that stirred within, but a strange awareness, a trembling whisper that said your life was no longer your own. It began as a quiet restlessness. The familiar places felt smaller. The routines that once gave comfort now echoed hollow, like rooms stripped of their furniture. Somewhere between waking and sleep, you began to sense a call, not in words, but in resonance. A pulse from the universe itself, beckoning you home. You tried to dismiss it. You told yourself it was fatigue, a passing thought, but the feeling persisted, weaving itself through your every breath. The world seemed to tilt, slightly off its axis, as if waiting for you to notice. And when you did, when your heart finally listened, something ancient and infinite stirred awake inside you. The voice was not loud, but it was absolute. It said, "It is time." You didn't know what that meant. You only knew that it was truth. There is a moment in every life when the ordinary fractures, when the world you once knew dissolves into mist. You stand on the threshold, uncertain whether to step forward or retreat. But something inside you, something older than fear, urges you on. This is that moment. The call you hear is not random. It is the echo of a purpose written long before your first breath. The universe has watched you wander, waiting for the day your soul would remember what it came here to do. That day is now. You feel the pull to rise, to move, to break the invisible chains that have kept you earthbound. It is terrifying, and yet it feels like coming home. You sense that everything you have lost, everything that once broke you, has been preparing you for this awakening. You wonder if you are ready. The truth is, no one ever is. The signs come in whispers, a sudden disinterest in the things you once chased, a weightlessness in solitude, a yearning for depth that no comfort can soothe. It feels as if your soul is shedding layers, memories, identities. You try to cling to what was, but it slips through your fingers like sand. The more you fight it, the stronger the current pulls you toward the unknown. This is the divine metamorphosis, the unraveling before rebirth. Every chosen one faces this crossroads, the moment of surrender. The world will call you foolish for listening to what cannot be heard. But the divine does not speak in noise, it speaks in silence. It moves through intuition, through dreams, through the quiet ache in your heart that refuses to fade. And when you finally stop running, you realize the truth. You were never lost. You were only being prepared. But the awakening is not peace. It is fire. It burns through illusions, demanding honesty. It shows you the weight of every false mask, every half-lived truth. You begin to see that your suffering was never punishment, it was initiation. Every heartbreak, every loss, every night you thought would never end, was carving space in you for the light to enter. You tremble at the thought, how could pain be sacred? Yet in the stillness, a knowing voice replies, because it stripped away what you were never meant to keep. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you see it the vastness of your own soul stretching beyond time. The realization hits you like lightning. You were never small. The cage was never real. You open your hands, you let go. As you do, the world shifts. Synchronicities bloom like constellations, guiding your way. A stranger's words pierce through your thoughts, as if spoken directly to your soul. A song plays at the exact moment you need to hear it. A number, a symbol, a dream, it all begins to connect. The universe is speaking, and for the first time, you understand its language. This is alignment. This is remembrance. You realize the call was never outside you. It was your own higher self whispering through time, saying, "Wake up. It's time to come home." You feel both exhilarated and terrified. Because home is not a place, it's the person you were destined to become. And that transformation will cost you everything false. The world around you begins to resist. Friends drift. Opportunities dissolve. Even your own thoughts turn against you in moments of doubt. But beneath the chaos, there is clarity. This falling apart is not destruction, it's divine reconstruction. You are being rebuilt in light. So you take the first step. It is small, hesitant, trembling. But the universe trembles with you. Every chosen one begins here at the edge of faith, staring into the unknown. wondering if the leap will break them or set them free. And somewhere beyond the fear, beyond the silence, the truth whispers again. You were never meant to stay asleep. This is your awakening. This is the beginning. If you feel this truth, hit like and subscribe. And remember, write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign of your divine alignment, the chosen one. The night felt endless. You stood at the window, watching the horizon blur into darkness, your reflection faint against the glass. It was not the world outside that troubled you, it was the one within. The silence had become unbearable. It was no longer peace, but pressure, as if the heavens themselves were waiting for your next breath. You whispered a question to the void. Why me? No answer came. Only the steady pulse of your own heartbeat. It was enough. Somewhere deep inside, the truth stirred again. You were not chosen for your perfection. You were chosen for your persistence, for your refusal to break even when everything inside you begged for rest. But understanding the truth required descent into fear, into confusion, into faith itself. You didn't yet know that awakening begins not with light, but with darkness. The days that followed were disorienting. You tried to live as before, to move through ordinary hours, to act as though nothing had changed. Yet every moment shimmered with strange electricity. Conversations felt hollow, laughter distant. Even the rhythm of life seemed to shift, as though a secret pattern hid beneath its surface. And then came the conflict, the moment when faith collided with reason. You questioned your sanity. Were these signs real, or were they fragments of your imagination desperate for meaning? You remembered the teachings that told you to stay grounded, to trust logic over feeling. Yet your intuition screamed louder each day. You were caught between two worlds, the tangible and the unseen. The rational mind called it illusion, but the soul called it memory. You started to understand that truth is not always reasonable, and the divine never negotiates with doubt, it waits for surrender. One night, you dreamed of falling through a vast sky, weightless and unafraid. A voice echoed through the air, soft but commanding. Trust the descent. Only through falling will you remember how to rise. You woke in tears. Something inside you shifted again, as though the dream had opened a hidden chamber in your chest. The message lingered all day, threading itself through your every thought. To trust the fall meant to let go of control, and that terrified you. For years you had built walls of certainty around yourself, beliefs, habits, labels, expectations. They were your safety, your structure, your proof of belonging. Now those walls were cracking, and you were faced with a truth you didn't want to see. The life you had built was never truly yours. It was a reflection of who you thought you had to be. And now, the universe was asking you to burn it down. You resisted. You prayed for clarity, but clarity didn't come. Instead came loss. Opportunities disappeared. People turned away. Doors closed with finality. You mistook it for punishment, not realizing it was divine pruning, the removal of everything not meant for your next chapter. The pain of that detachment was unbearable. You fought to hold on, begged for things to return to the way they were. But the voice within remained silent, watching as you wrestled with the inevitable. Until one evening, standing alone under a bruised sky, it finally spoke. You cannot carry your past into the future I am preparing. And you understood. The silence had not been neglect, it had been mercy. The universe had waited for you to be still enough to hear. There is a strange peace that comes after breaking, not because the pain disappears, but because resistance does. You began to walk differently, your steps slower, your breath deeper, your gaze softer. You no longer chased certainty, you listened for it. You began to see how divine timing wove itself through every setback, every detour. What once felt like chaos now looked like choreography. The lost job that forced you to rediscover your purpose. The failed relationship that taught you to love without attachment. The nights of doubt that carved space for faith. It all began to make sense, not logically, but spiritually. You realized that nothing had been random. Every event, every heartbreak, every delay had been part of a greater rhythm, one designed not to punish you, but to prepare you. But just as peace returned, the next test arrived. It always does. The world began to react to your transformation. People who once celebrated you now questioned your choices. Some said you had changed and they were right. Others accused you of arrogance, of chasing illusions, of leaving behind the world that raised you. Their words stung because they echoed your deepest fear. What if they're right? The old part of you wanted to explain, to justify, to make them understand. But the newer part, the one being born, knew the truth. Not everyone will hear the same call. Not everyone is meant to walk with you through the fire. You looked into the mirror and saw two reflections: who you were and who you were becoming. The distance between them widened with each passing day. You whispered, "Am I losing myself?" The voice replied, "No, you're remembering." And so you stood again at the threshold between the comfort of the known and the terror of destiny. You understood now that faith is not about certainty. It is the courage to step forward even when everything in you trembles. The horizon ahead shimmered, vast and unfamiliar. You didn't know where it led, but you knew you couldn't turn back. For behind you, the door had already closed. You took a deep breath, feeling the weight of all you had released and all you had yet to become. Then, with the faintest smile, you stepped forward into the unknown that had been calling your name since the beginning of time. This is the moment where destiny begins to move. Write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign that your spirit is aligning with divine timing. The chosen one. You awoke before dawn, your heart pounding with an invisible rhythm. The air felt alive, charged with meaning you could not name. Outside, the sky still wore its shadowed blue, but something inside you had already begun to stir a certainty that change was no longer coming. It was here. You tried to silence the trembling in your chest, but the feeling refused to fade. It grew stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat that was not your own. You realized it was not fear, it was calling, the kind that bends reality until the old world can no longer hold you. Every chosen one reaches this hour, the moment when hesitation dies, and the soul demands movement. But you did not yet know that answering the call would not only awaken your destiny, it would expose every illusion you had ever loved. That morning, you spoke your truth aloud for the first time. The words came like confession, raw and unsteady. "I can't keep living this way. I'm meant for something else." The echo hung in the room like a secret breaking free. For a moment, there was silence. Then came the storm. People who once called you friend turned cold. Their voices carried judgment disguised as concern. They said you were chasing fantasy, that the world doesn't bend for dreamers, that this spiritual journey was just an escape. Their laughter burned deeper than cruelty, it carried disbelief. You told yourself their doubts didn't matter, but their words burrowed into your skin. You questioned everything. Was it arrogance to believe in divine purpose? Was this calling just an illusion built to comfort the broken parts of your soul? Faith cracked beneath the weight of logic. But that night, as you lay awake, something strange happened. The silence began to shimmer. You heard a faint hum, soft, rhythmic, like the universe itself breathing. And in that vibration, a whisper rose. Do not fear their disbelief. Their doubts are the proof that you are leaving their world behind. You wept not from sadness, but from recognition. From that day forward, everything became a mirror. The universe began reflecting your awakening through people, places, and chance encounters. Some eyes lit with recognition when they looked at you, as if they too carried the secret. Others recoiled, uncomfortable with what they could not understand. This was the third sign of transformation, the revelation that your inner change would disturb the world around you. Every soul you meet becomes a reflection of your evolution, a test of your discernment. You began to see the hidden architecture of life, how every connection had been placed precisely where it needed to be, not to comfort you, but to challenge you. You learned that love can either free or bind, that not all who walk beside you are meant to stay, that the higher your frequency rises, the fewer people can breathe in your atmosphere. It was painful, but necessary. Growth always requires release. There were nights when loneliness felt unbearable. You longed for someone to understand, to hold you and say, "I see what you see." But the higher path is carved in solitude. The divine isolates the awakened not to punish them, but to prepare them. In the silence, your senses sharpened. You began to notice patterns, numbers, dreams, coincidences that were too precise to dismiss. The same symbols repeated in different forms, like a language meant only for you. You felt both chosen and cursed, enlightened yet burdened. The duality tore at your sanity until you realized that light and shadow are not enemies, they are mirrors of the same source. In that realization, your fear softened. The universe wasn't testing you, it was training you. Every loss was calibration, every silence was instruction, every heartbreak was redirection, and you began to understand that divinity doesn't speak in miracles, it speaks in mirrors. One evening, as you watched the sunset bleed across the horizon, you whispered to the wind, "Why must awakening hurt so much?" The answer came not as words, but as a knowing that filled the air around you. Pain was not punishment, it was purification. A sacred cleansing that burned away everything false, until only truth remained. You remembered the faces that had left, the hands that once held yours, the dreams you had buried. And suddenly, gratitude replaced grief, because every ending had been an act of grace. The universe had not taken from you, it had freed you. You were learning to love the empty spaces, to see them not as loss, but as invitation. For only the hollow vessel can be filled with light. The next morning, you woke with a strange calm. You no longer needed everyone to understand you. Their misunderstanding was part of your protection. You realized that divine purpose does not seek validation, it demands embodiment. You began to walk differently. You spoke less, listened more. The world still resisted you, but you no longer fought back. You simply existed in truth, and that truth began to shift everything around you. Those who could not match your vibration faded quietly, while new souls entered rare, radiant, and real. They spoke your unspoken language. Their presence felt ancient, as if you had known them for lifetimes. They did not try to fix you or explain you. They simply walked beside you, mirrors of your light. You had found your soul companions, but even that piece was not the end, it was preparation. The universe never lets the chosen one rest for long. You began to feel another stirring, deeper and wilder than before. It was not the call to awaken, it was the call to act. The voice that once whispered now thundered through your dreams. You are ready. The world needs your light. And yet, a new fear arose. How could you carry such purpose into a world built on forgetting? How could you speak divine truth to ears that still crave silence? You hesitated at the edge of that revelation, torn between courage and comfort. But the path of the chosen one is never about safety, it is about surrender. You looked toward the night sky and whispered, "If I fall, let it be into purpose." And the stars flickered in reply, as if to say, "Then rise, and let the world remember." Write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign that your soul has entered divine alignment. The chosen one, the night was still, but your spirit was not. You felt the tremor before the transformation, the pull of destiny stretching you beyond the edges of who you thought you were. It was not a voice this time, but a vibration, an energy that pulsed through your bones, whispering of a journey that demanded everything you had and everything you were about to become. You stood before the unknown, trembling. The air itself seemed to listen. Somewhere deep in the silence, the universe was preparing the path. You could sense it, the gathering of forces, the alignment of unseen energies. What lay ahead would not be easy. But this was not about ease. This was about evolution. You took a breath and felt it in your soul. The time of preparation had arrived. The call to depart is not a command, it is a covenant. It does not shout, it invites. And you knew this truth as your heart began to shed its final attachments. You no longer felt at home in the places that once held you. The laughter of others seemed distant. The comfort of familiarity turned hollow. It was as though the walls of your old life had dissolved, and in their place stood a vast expanse of possibility, terrifying, magnificent, infinite. You tried to plan your next step, but every time you reached for control, the path vanished beneath your feet. The divine did not want your strategy, it wanted your surrender. So you stopped fighting. You let go. The silence that followed was not emptiness, it was initiation. You began to prepare, though not with your hands, with your heart. This preparation was not about packing bags or choosing destinations. It was an inner departure. The sacred act of releasing everything you cannot carry into the next dimension of your becoming. Mentally, you started to unlearn the world. You questioned every belief that had kept you small. The voice of doubt still echoed, but now you faced it with compassion. You understood that fear was not the enemy, it was the guardian of thresholds. Emotionally, You confronted the ghosts you had avoided for years. You opened the locked rooms of your soul and let the light flood in. The pain that surfaced did not destroy you, it revealed you. Each tear was an initiation, each ache a release. Spiritually, you began to trust what you could not see. You stopped begging for signs and started becoming one. Prayer turned into conversation. Meditation turned into communion. You no longer asked the universe to prove itself. You began to act as if it already had. This was not arrogance. It was remembrance. Still, there were days when faith felt like fiction. You woke up empty, wondering if you had imagined it all, the signs, the synchronicities, the whispers of destiny. The old world called you back with its promises of safety, and for a moment, you almost believed it. But then something small, a feather on your path, a number on a clock, a stranger's words, reminded you that you were not walking alone. These weren't coincidences. They were confirmations. The universe was leaving breadcrumbs for the faithful. Each time you followed one, you felt the rhythm of divine timing pulsing stronger. Everything was unfolding precisely as it should, not too early, not too late, but in the sacred precision of cosmic order. You began to see that every delay had been divine protection, every detour had been calibration, every ending had been a door disguised as loss. And for the first time, you didn't need to know what was next. It was enough to know you were being led. The closer you came to your departure, the more intense the purification became. People you loved drifted away. Old dreams dissolved. The familiar began to crumble, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. You cried, not because you were weak, but because you were shedding the weight of 1,000 lifetimes. You had to empty yourself so that the universe could fill you again. And in the quiet aftermath, something extraordinary happened: peace. Not the fragile peace of comfort, but the fierce stillness that comes when the soul stands in full alignment with its purpose. You felt it in your breath, in your pulse, in the stillness between thoughts. The readiness was no longer something to reach for, it was who you had become. You had crossed from waiting into becoming. And yet, even as peace settled, a shadow followed. Doubt, old and cunning, whispered from the corners of your mind. What if you fail? What if you were never chosen at all? You froze, paralyzed by its voice. For a moment, the world dimmed, and you felt the gravity of all your uncertainties pressing down. But then, another voice rose from within, the one that had guided you since the beginning. It said, "The one who doubts and the one who believes are both you. The difference is which voice you feed." You smiled through the tears, because now you understood the divine did not need your perfection. It needed your participation. Faith was not about never doubting. It was about choosing to move despite the doubt. You whispered into the night, "I am ready." And the wind replied, "Then walk." So you did, not with confidence, but with conviction. You walked into the unknown, carrying nothing but faith and the memory of light. The horizon opened before you, vast, golden, and alive. You could feel the unseen currents of destiny pulling you forward. Behind you, the old life faded into silence. Ahead, the new one pulsed with promise. Every breath, every step, every heartbeat was a declaration of trust. You were no longer waiting for the universe to move. You were moving with it. And as you crossed that invisible line between who you were and who you are becoming, the truth settled deep into your bones. You are not walking toward your purpose. You are remembering it. This is the sacred departure, the beginning of your becoming. Write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign that your soul is now ready to step into divine purpose. The chosen one. The silence no longer frightened you. It had become a companion, a mirror reflecting the sacred vastness within. You stood beneath an early dawn sky, watching the faint light unfold across the horizon. For the first time, the quiet did not feel empty, it felt full, pulsing with invisible presence. You understood now that solitude was not separation, it was initiation. This was the fifth sign, the descent into sacred isolation. The world around you had grown distant. Conversations lost their flavor. The laughter of crowds no longer reached your heart. You were not lonely, you were awakening. The old rhythms no longer fit your soul, and the universe had drawn you away, not to abandon you, but to refine you. The path of the chosen one is not paved with applause. It is carved through silence. In solitude, you begin to hear what the noise of the world had drowned out the gentle hum of your soul. You realize that stillness is not emptiness, but the birthplace of power. The universe speaks most clearly to the one who dares to listen. At first, you resisted. You filled the silence with distractions, conversations, movement, anything to escape the ache of being alone. But the divine was patient. It stripped away everything that blurred your hearing until you had no choice but to face yourself. The mirror turned inward. You saw the parts of you that still clung to fear, to validation, to control. You faced your shadows not as enemies, but as teachers. They revealed how much of your identity had been built on the expectations of others. You began to ask, who am I when no one is watching? Who am I without the world's reflection? The answer came slowly. Like dawn creeping over the edge of night, solitude became your sanctuary. In that sacred space, you began to rebuild yourself from truth. You discovered that silence heals, that every breath carries wisdom when received with awareness, that your soul, once drowned in noise, now spoke in languages older than memory. You began to notice patterns in the stillness, the pulse of your heart syncing with the rhythm of the earth, the rise and fall of your breath aligning with unseen tides. You felt yourself becoming part of something vast and eternal. Each moment alone was a conversation with the infinite. And yet, even in this holy solitude, the ache of connection lingered. There were nights you whispered to the stars, "Will anyone understand this path?" The wind seemed to answer with compassion. Not many, but a few will, and they are already on their way. It happened unexpectedly. A stranger appeared, perhaps through a passing conversation, a message, or a moment that felt too perfect to be random. Their words resonated with the same frequency as your soul. They spoke truths you had never said aloud. Their presence felt familiar, ancient. You realized this was no coincidence. The divine had begun to send its chosen allies, the companions of your next chapter. These were not ordinary friendships. They were soul recognitions. They required no explanation, no proof, no performance. The connection was not built, it was remembered. Their light matched yours, not because it was the same, but because it was in harmony. They were not here to save you or to follow you. They were here to walk beside you, mirrors of divine design, reflections of your courage. Together, you formed a constellation of purpose, small but radiant against the vast dark of the world. Still, discernment became your compass. For even as kindred souls appeared, the shadows did too, those who spoke the language of light, but carried the vibration of doubt. They came not as enemies, but as tests, their energy subtly draining, their words coated in sweetness that masked control. The universe watched how you would respond. Would you shrink to keep the peace, or rise to guard your frequency? This time, you chose truth. You spoke less, observed more, and began to trust your intuition like a sacred compass. When your body tensed, when your spirit dimmed in someone's presence, you took it as guidance, not guilt. You realized that love is not proven through endurance, it is proven through resonance. The right people expand your light, the wrong ones shrink it. And so, with compassion but firmness, you began to release again. This season of solitude and selective company became the crucible of your transformation. It was here that your faith deepened into knowing. You no longer prayed for signs, you became the sign. You no longer chased purpose, you embodied it. Days blended into nights of reflection. You journaled, meditated, and walked beneath the stars. Slowly, the noise within began to fade, replaced by clarity. The divine had been speaking all along. But now, you could finally hear. You began to understand that this path was never about escaping the world, it was about returning to it transformed. The silence was not the end of your journey, it was the forge that made you ready. And then, one night, you felt it a shift, so subtle yet so absolute, that you stopped breathing for a moment. The stillness around you deepened, vibrating with presence. The voice returned, not from above, but from within. You have prepared long enough. The time to walk is near. What was once seeking now must become service. Your hands trembled. You had prayed for purpose, and now purpose was calling your name. You knew the solitude was ending. Soon, you would be sent back into the world, not as who you were, but as who you were meant to be. The realization filled you with awe and terror all at once. You whispered into the night, "I am not ready." The voice answered gently, "You never are. But you are willing, and that is enough." You closed your eyes, the stars blazing behind your lids, and felt the universe pulse in rhythm with your heartbeat. The silence had done its work. You were no longer waiting for light. You had become it. Write 333 inches, the comments. It's a prophetic sign that your isolation is ending, and your mission is about to begin. The chosen one. The wind carried a strange stillness that morning, the kind that arrives before great change. You felt it in your bones, a quiet certainty that the waiting was over. Everything the universe had been preparing you for was gathering into form. The silence that once held you in isolation now pulsed with direction. The call had transformed. It was no longer a whisper. It was command. You stood on sacred ground, though the world around you looked ordinary. Cars passed. Voices murmured. Life continued as if nothing had changed. And yet, beneath the surface, the fabric of your reality had shifted. You were not the same. The air recognized it. The light knew it. Even your own shadow seemed to bow before the new you. The final chapter had begun. You walked with a calm that frightened those who once knew your chaos. They saw your eyes steady, luminous, unshaken, and they asked what had happened. You smiled, unable to explain. How could you tell them that you had met the divine not in the heavens, but in your own breaking? That you had found peace not by escaping the world, but by surrendering to it completely? You tried once to put it into words, but language failed. Truth this vast does not live in sentences, it breathes in silence. So you let your actions speak. You no longer chased outcomes. You moved when the wind moved, spoke when the heart spoke, trusted when logic trembled. You had become a vessel, emptied of resistance, filled with light. Every step you took was alignment in motion. Every breath was prayer, and the universe began to respond. Synchronicities multiplied like constellations. Doors opened without knocking. You met people who spoke your hidden thoughts before you said them. Events unfolded in impossible precision, as if reality itself was rearranging to meet your vibration. It wasn't luck, it was law. The law of divine alignment. What you radiate, you attract. You were no longer chasing destiny, you were magnetizing it. But with power came responsibility. The universe does not gift light without testing the heart that carries it. And so came the trials. Opportunities appeared wrapped in illusion paths that looked golden but carried the energy of distraction. You learned to listen deeper than appearances. Not every shining thing was meant for you. Some doors glittered only to test your discernment. Your intuition sharpened like a blade. You began to move not from desire, but from direction. And though it made your path lonelier, it made your soul luminous. Then came the confrontation, the final one. A voice rose from within. Familiar and ancient, the same one that had doubted since the beginning. You could still go back. You could choose safety. You could live quietly and let the world forget. You stood before that voice, trembling. It wasn't darkness, it was memory. The echo of an old self terrified of its own greatness. You stepped closer, not to silence it, but to thank it. For without that fear, you would never have known courage. Without doubt, faith would have no meaning. You whispered, "I honor you." But you no longer lead. And with that, the voice faded. The last chain broke. You felt an invisible veil lift from your eyes. The world seemed to glow, edges softer, colors deeper. You realized that enlightenment is not escape, it is seeing everything as sacred, even the pain. The days that followed felt like living inside a prayer. You began to create again, not from ambition, but from alignment. Everything you touched carried intention. Your words healed, your silence guided. You were no longer seeking miracles, you had become one. And the people you once thought lost began to return, not all, but a few, drawn by the new frequency of your being. Some recognized you immediately, others could not understand what had changed. You did not need them to. You knew now that those meant to walk beside you would find you without force. Your solitude had turned to sovereignty. You had entered the stage of embodiment, the phase where knowing becomes doing, and faith becomes flesh. Then one night, under a sky that shimmered with quiet fire, the divine returned. Not as a voice, not as a sign, but as presence. You felt it in the air around you, in the ground beneath your feet, in the rhythm of your own heart. It was everything, and it was you. No division, no hierarchy, only oneness. You whispered, "So this is home." And in that moment, you understood. You were never chosen to be above others. You were chosen to remember the truth, that all are one. The chosen one is not a title, it is a mirror. It reflects what every soul is destined to become when it surrenders to love. You laughed softly, the sound dissolving into tears. Every question, every wound, every battle had led to this, an infinite stillness that spoke louder than thunder. You no longer needed proof of divinity. You were living it. And yet, the journey was not ending. It was beginning again, this time from a higher octave of purpose. You felt the call to share what you had learned, not through preaching, but through presence. The world did not need more noise. It needed living reminders of light. You realized that your purpose was not to awaken others by force, but to live so truthfully that your existence became permission for theirs. You are no longer waiting for signs, you are the sign. You are no longer searching for alignment, you are the alignment. You are no longer asking for purpose, you are the purpose. And when you speak now, your words carry weight, not because they are loud, but because they are true. The chosen one is not a myth. It is a memory of what humanity was always meant to be. You stand as proof that darkness does not destroy the light, it teaches it how to shine. That pain is not punishment, it is preparation. And that endings are not deaths, they are doors. The journey has stripped you, refined you, rebuilt you. But what remains is eternal, the spark that never dimmed, the flame that never surrendered, the love that never left. You raise your eyes to the horizon. The world stretches wide before you, shimmering with unseen promise. The future is not something you walk into. It unfolds beneath your steps. And as you begin to walk again, the air hums with quiet recognition. The universe does not bow, it rises with you. For the first time, you understand what the voice meant when it said, "It is time." This is not the end of your awakening. This is the birth of your purpose. Write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign that you've remembered who you truly are and that the universe is now moving with you.